Dr. Ayotunde Ayobello is a psychiatrist at Yale Child Study Center's new Westport location. Like his two colleagues there, he helps evaluate and treat anxiety, ADHD, and executive functioning issues. Ayo's specialty is young athletes. He's well suited to that specialty. In addition to his medical and therapeutic training, Ayo is a former high-level athlete himself. He knows what makes athletes succeed and where they can stumble. So, Dr. Ayo, welcome to 06880, the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. I mentioned you're an athlete. Some details.
That is correct. Yep. So, yes, I played basketball and soccer. I grew up in Nigeria, and those are two sports that are really big. So I got into soccer and basketball pretty early, and as I started to get taller, I was like, I think basketball is going to be my sport.
You could have been a goalkeeper.
I could have, yes. So I, dedicated a lot of time to basketball and eventually ended up playing in Europe for many years.
Where exactly?
So I played in Ukraine, I played in Russia, I played in Poland, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Played power forward and center, and it was a wonderful experience.
Wow. And how did you transition into psychiatry?
So I have always, had just this interest in, the mind and, working with people. And, I also had a big, family influence. My brother, is also a psychiatrist. So I learned a lot about, the field, through him. But as I went through med school, the field of psychiatry was just something that caught my eye and caught my mind. I had a wonderful, teacher who really taught really well and, encouraged me to go into the field. I owe a lot to her today. So, I think those were the things that really drove me into the field.
And then the decision to sort of focus on young athletes?
So that came, from like my own personal experience with, competitive athletics. I sort of went through the, whole process of, getting better and better in my sport and then pushing my body, really hard. And, eventually, getting an injury, that I had to sort of recover and push through. And, I think that whole process really, showed me and taught me the impact that, an injury could have, especially someone who, being an athlete was a big part of my identity. And I learned a lot from that experience. And, I sort of took that forward.
Were you injured?
I was, yes. I had an ankle injury and had to sort of rehabilitate and, come back from that. And it really taught me a lot about, the intersection, between, mental health and competitive athletics.
So the Yale Child Study Center has just opened a couple of months ago. It's at the on Kings Highway North.
Correct.
Near downtown. What do you do there, and who are you in particular seeing?
Yep. So this is a very exciting, project because it's the first time, Yale has really, expanded its services to the Fairfield County, area. And especially for mental health, specifically child mental health. So in this office, we provide, specialized services for children birth to 18. And we, focus on, treating anxiety, ADHD and executive functioning disorders. And we are lucky to have, just incredible, staff and incredible faculty. So I'm a child psychiatrist, and I work there full time. And, we also have two amazing psychologists, who have wonderful experience in, school-based learning and, working with children with learning disabilities. And, it's a really wonderful team that we put together.
And you yourself, what are some of the issues that you're working with young athletes?
So yes, my focus, with young athletes is really trying to use sports principles to improve, just wellness and, the mental health of, children and adolescents in general. I have found that, just the realm of competitive athletics can put a lot of pressure on young minds and young bodies. And I feel that from my own experience, it was something that I wasn't very well informed about. And so I'm really passionate about supporting parents and supporting children and adolescents about how to navigate those highs and lows.
Can you give me some examples?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, in general, we are in a very competitive, area. And, I work with a lot of kids who, you know, um, love, sports and, love athletics, but they also deal with a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure applied early on for children, and there's a demand, for them to maybe sometimes outperform what their bodies are capable of. And so I'm in a position where I can help guide parents, on how to, navigate those specific situations and also help children and adolescents, manage, their bodies and, improve their mindset, when it comes to sports. And I've seen a lot of benefits that can come from that.
Can you give me an example of what sort of pressures a kid might be feeling and what you would say and how you would sort of navigate through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I think, one of the most common things that I see is, a child is expected to perform at a level that is, very high, and they feel the pressure of, maybe not meeting up to, that expectation. So, for example, I had a family who one of their sons to really excel, in soccer. And, they sent him off to this really fancy camp, in Spain, where, he got to play with, Real Madrid and, played with all these, world class, midfielders. And, that put a lot of pressure on him. And I think from the perspective of his parents, they felt that that would help motivate him and push him further. But during our conversations, it seemed to weigh him down, in that he had the opportunity to play with these world class athletes, and it made him feel like he would never be able to get to that level. So I had to, sort of reconcile the expectations that, the parents had and, the child had, and, sort of provide a new target, that, everyone felt was, possible. And, we were able to really improve his performances, by doing that.
So you lowered expectations and managed to keep him motivated.
I wouldn't necessarily say lowered. I would say, change
Okay.
and modify, because, I do think there's a benefit to, pushing kids to be the best they can be. I think that's what every parent wants. They want, their kid to, meet the potential that they believe they have. So I do think there's some benefits to pushing a child, but I think it's important to do it in a way that is developmentally appropriate and is safe for the child.
But it's great that this young athlete found his way to the Yale Center. right? I mean, how obviously they came in because there was something going on.
Right, right. There is that concern of, is my child just not motivated, or is this a, issue with self-confidence, or do they not really want to play this sport? And I talk about this then where, I recognize two types of student athletes. There are the student athletes that are, really motivated by, just the desire to win. They want to, win the trophy. They want to win the medal, the end goal. And that's really enough to push and motivate them. But then there's also this second cohort of athletes who are more motivated with self-improvement, where they benefit better by just, setting personal goals and just trying to be better than they were the previous day, improving their technique and, not really focusing on the end goal. And I tend to find that second cohort, that second cohort tends to do a lot better in the long run, and eventually, also gets the trophy and the medals, but they don't have that level of pressure on them.
Where does the pressure come from? Is it parents? Is it society? Is it internal? Why does a young kid, feel pressured to excel?
Yeah, I think all of the above. We live in a environment, in a community that is very high achieving, and sometimes there are unconscious messages that are delivered to this child. I have a lot of parents say, "Oh, I don't know where the pressure comes from. We don't put any pressure on on the child to perform," but there is an environmental pressure, there's a social pressure, where they hear messaging about maybe to get into a certain university or into a certain college, you need to be on this level of athletics, and it's a subtle messaging, but I think it plays a big role over time.
So you work with the parents as well as the students?
Correct.
And do you do it together? How does that work?
So sometimes it is together, where, I have, the whole family, sort of sit down and, we have a conversation. A lot of times it's, working with, the child and, learning and understanding, what their internal motivation is, what is your internal compass for like what drives you. And, when I learn more about the child, I'm able to sort of harness, what I see, is going to be helpful. And then, I can, draw the parents in and say, how about we try this approach? And, I find that a collaborative approach is always better and, tends to get the best outcome.
And you do it all by conversation? Do you ever go watch them play?
Not only do I watch them play, sometimes I play with them.
Really?
Yes. Especially for the kids that play basketball or soccer. I
Sort of an
always,
unfair kid going against a professional.
yeah, yeah, sometimes they need to to see that, or, to, have someone push them around a
Yeah.
little bit. But I think
But you do get out there with them.
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Yes. I think, the goal, is really to build, the rapport with them. And sometimes I can give them a few tips and, a few pointers here and there.
Do you have a hoop at your office?
No, not currently, but
Okay.
thankfully there are a lot of like local courts and, places that we can play.
Gender differences. Are there gender differences in what you're seeing?
Yes, I tend to see, gender differences, to the expectations, and at the end of the day, the overall goal. I find that the pressure on girls, tends to be higher because, when we talk about like, D1 athletics and, playing in college, the spots tend to be smaller for girls. And so the pressure is more. As a result of that. And I think it's also, sports specific where, there are certain sports that carry, much more pressure, than others. Rowing, for one,
Rowing has a lot of pressure.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Besides the fact that you're going backwards and can't see where you're going, what are the pressures on rowers?
Well, I think for one, it's a sport where you're not really allowed to have off days. You are part of a system, and that system will not work if you're not there. That's a lot of pressure. The pressure to maintain a certain weight, is also big for adolescent girls, and sometimes that can cause other problems, other medical issues, imbalances in their electrolytes, and there are a lot of mental health correlates. It affects a poor diet or a calorie deficit will affect mood and concentration and attention, and over time that can be quite harmful.
Are there any sports where there is very little pressure?
Well,
Have you seen that?
I think there are, I guess, some that are less pressure than others, but I think sports in general, carries a certain pressure to win and to perform. So, there's this pressure almost everywhere. And then, there's also the internal pressure that, the athlete can put on himself or herself to perform or to meet certain expectations. So that also plays a role as well.
Any differences between individual sports, tennis, golf, track, and team sports in terms of what you see?
Yes, I do. So, with team sports, I find that the team dynamic is extremely important. The relationship that you have with your teammates, the sort of culture, that the team has, it's crucial in supporting each other. And, that's not something that you necessarily find in, individual sports. A lot of individual sports relies on, supports from coaches, from, family members, and, that offers a different dynamic. And, that's one big difference that I see.
As an athlete, you're aware of the joys of sports, the lessons that athletics teaches. Are kids today getting that joy, those positive things from sports, or is it, sometimes I get a sense that it's almost a job for them?
Absolutely, that's a great observation. I believe that the main issue with sports these days is that the transition from a sport being, fun, and, interesting to, this being a job happens too early. So in the typical course of, athletic performance, a child can start to play, basketball or soccer, pretty early. And, initially it's like just a lot of fun. They get to play with their friends, they get to socialize. But it gets to a point where they start to say, maybe I can take this, really seriously. And, I start to like devote a lot of time to it. Usually that happens, like towards like high school and, higher grades. But what we see now is that this is starting to happen much earlier. And, the transition from, sports, just being a fun, and happy, hobby, to, this is a lot of pressure and this is work, is happening really early now. And I think that can be detrimental.
And how do you deal with that? What do you say to that young boy or girl?
Well, I think it's a systemic, issue, because a child is never in a silo. A child is always part of a system. So, I think, having conversations with parents, with, the, sports team, the coaches, it's all a system. And I think, having, better knowledge about, how this impacts the child, will help change this system.
So what do you talk to coaches?
Yes, I do. So a lot of times I will have conversations with coaches. Sometimes I, come up with strategies, to help like motivate a child. And, the coaches play a big role in this as well.
Are they receptive, or do they think you're just, some shrink that's trying to meddle?
Sometimes they're like, who is this guy? We don't know who this is. But the few people who, have a chance to like meet me or like, see me on the court, like playing with
They
the
see you're the
kids,
real deal.
right, are able to say, okay, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about.
Wow.
So,
Does a kid ever come out and flat out say, I hate this. The only reason I'm doing it is because my parents want me to, or my parents think I should. Do they ever verbalize that?
sometimes they do. Yes, sometimes they do. And I think, it can be, a really hard place, for parents to be, because, parents want to, like I said earlier, push, their children to be the best they can be. And, there are some examples where, a kid, maybe stops playing lacrosse and 1 year later is like, oh, I wish I didn't quit. And the parents feel terrible because they allowed, the child to quit. So there's that balance that, I think is important to have. But yeah, there are some times when, children just outright say, I think, I don't want to do this sport anymore, but I don't know how to tell my dad or, tell my mom, because, they've invested so much into this. And, that can be a hard place to be.
Yeah. I mean, at the club level, it's tens of thousands of dollars and every weekend, and the kid doesn't want to disappoint the parent.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. Is this a Fairfield County issue, or is it nationwide?
Well, I think there are some issues, specific to Fairfield County. Obviously, it's a community with a lot of resources, and with that also comes, unique, expectations and unique pressures. Um, but I think certain things, are nationwide. One is, identifying, athletics as, a way to, progress into college or, move on to the next step. I think that's like nationwide. Mhm.
So what can parents do? What's your advice, excuse me, to a parent of a young child who's about to start sports, or someone who is, already in it for a few years?
I would say, taking the approach of, helping the child see sports and athletics as a way to improve their personal best, a way to be better than they were the previous day. I always find, setting, specific goals and, specific targets, specific to the child as the most helpful way, and, also teaching the child to be proud of the like little effort that they put in. The goal should not always be, winning the competition or, winning the trophy. If you, ran or you skated on the ice like longer than you did yesterday, that's an improvement that should be celebrated. And I think when we approach sports, with that perspective or with that mindset, the child can self-motivate. And I think that's a great way to approach sports.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's under the radar? What are some trends in youth sports and in you're dealing with them that we're not talking about yet, but might be in the months and years ahead?
I think the ability for children to sort of go deeper or choose earlier is something that I think will change. Where the ability to commit to a sport. I think right now the approach is maybe you try a couple of things and you decide what you want or what you think is a good fit for you. But I think in the future, like people are gonna sort of hone in much quicker on what their body type fits to, or what they're interested in, and devote more time to it.
Great.
Yep.
Anything else? Anything I should have asked that I did not?
Well, not that I can think of. We are, really excited, of course, to be in the community, and really glad, to be on your show. And we, just hope to be able to support children and families, in the area, and improve lives.
Great. Dr. Ayo of
Thank
the
you.
new Yale Child Study Center. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Here in Westport on Kings Highway North. Thanks for coming on 06880, the podcast, and talking about all things youth sports and psychiatry related. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You got it.